Moving abroad to a new country is never an easy thing, regardless of where you choose to move. In this episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, I want to help you out with a few tips on things that could make a little bit of a difference in your day-to-day life. These are not going to be in any particular order, but some little details that will help you along the way. I'm Rafael de Furia. Welcome back to another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, and let's get this episode started. This episode has been sponsored in part by Border.io. For more information about how they can help you get a Portuguese bank account and NIF, be sure to stick around. And of course, also a thanks to viewers like you for helping to make these episodes of Not Your Average Globetrotter possible through Patreon, as well as the thank you button here on YouTube. Anyway, the first thing, because whenever I start out these episodes that have something to do with moving abroad and things that can make your life easier, I always have to start it out by saying, learn the language, or at least learn some of the basics. But don't worry, that's not going to be counted towards one of this episode's tips, but just for the sake of tradition, why not? Anyway, the first real tip, not the next, but the first tip that I want to mention in this episode is to make sure that you always have cash with you. A lot of people these days may be used to, in different parts of the world, being able to always pay with a card, just tap it and go, or swipe it and go. In Europe, swiping your card isn't really so much of a thing. It's a lot of chip and pin or contactless. Contactless payments are something I'm going to get into in the next point, but always make sure you at least have some with you. But this takes me to point number 2. If you are going to be here and you're going to want to use a card here, foreign cards aren't always accepted. It really depends. I've been to some stores where they have multiple credit card machines, and some of them will and some of them won't. It just all really depends. So I highly advise, if you are going to be living in Portugal, for some people, it is actually required to have a bank account. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to also mention Border in this episode, because they do help people to get not only the NIF, which is also necessary for the bank account, but also they help people to get their bank accounts if it's necessary for them, or even if it's not. If you're somebody who's coming from the European Union, having a bank account isn't required. But even as somebody who is here as an Italian, I can say it is very worthwhile because sometimes they'll ask you if you want to pay by multibanco, and the multibanco system here is pretty robust. It works, and even there's a system called MBWay, and it's really great for making personal transfers from one person to another. And so there have been times when I've been out with friends and someone doesn't have cash with them, but then, for example, maybe I've had cash with me, and they say, hey, can I pay you back, or can I pay you through MBWay? And you just cover it, and yeah, it's no problem at all. The money shows up immediately, quick and easy. But also with the MBWay system, you can scan a QR code. And this is what I was saying about contactless payments. You do have some things like Apple Pay or NFC payments, like you just tap your card, whatever it may be. And those often are available, but not always. I have run into many situations where just a contactless payment is not possible to do because their machine isn't enabled for it. So that's where having this MBWay and doing it through an app on your phone, scanning a QR code, actually can come in handy here. So having that combination of being covered both by having cash and on top having an account here in Portugal can be very, very helpful. So that's where something like, for example, N26 or even Wise, this is an area where they might be a little bit lacking in comparison to some of the banks here. Like, you do actually have a couple banks. I know definitely for sure one bank that is absolutely free to use for just a basic personal account, but there may also be another one. I'm not going to mention them in this video just because this is not an endorsement of their services, but just to let you know that it does exist here. On to this next little tip. If you're going to be shopping regularly at the supermarkets here, I would say actually it can be really worthwhile signing up for the rewards programs. I signed up for rewards programs in different countries. However, I've actually found that some of the rewards programs here in Portugal offer maybe more than what I've seen in other places. Talking about two of the most common supermarket brands here, Pingo Doce and Continente, they both offer their own different separate systems. But I know, for example, Continente, they're actually affiliated with gas stations and fast food restaurants and other different types of stores. I think even there's a chain of health food stores that they're associated with. And for all of these things, you can accumulate points, credit, or even get coupons for your purchases. So definitely worthwhile considering here. It's just not necessary, but it's one of those things that along the way can kind of help make things a little bit smoother. This is kind of like a little bonus tip, and it has to do with this week's sponsor. It's about getting the NIF. Having a NIF, a tax code, a Portuguese personal tax code, can make a big difference when trying to sign up for contracts or even to get just an apartment, a legally rented apartment here. It's necessary to have these things. If you are even coming here as a European citizen, having it will be necessary for various tasks that you'll have to get done. So it's not just if you're coming from North America or wherever you're coming from. Even people from the European Union, it's really worthwhile having. Of course, for a bank account, phone contract, or even the rewards programs that I mentioned, having a NIF actually can make a difference. And then even when you are paying at the supermarket, giving over your NIF can be worthwhile. And also it's attached to other things. So really, if you are going to be here, it's one of those things that at the end of the day, I would say does make a really huge difference. But before we get into the last 2 points, here's a quick word from this week's sponsor. A big thanks to Border for sponsoring this week's episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Border offers the easiest way to get your NIF and Portuguese bank account, both of which are integral parts of your move to Portugal. Border can help you from any location around the world, wherever you are remotely, so that you don't have to travel to Portugal. Also at Border, you'll be dealing with English speakers who offer excellent customer support. They'll help you accomplish these necessary steps to get your new life started here in Portugal. Visit border.io/NYAG, that's BORDR.io/NYAG. Thank you again to Border for sponsoring this week's episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, and let's get back into the episode. This next tip I kind of partially mentioned a little bit already, and that is having a local Portuguese phone number. In Portugal, it is possible to just go to a phone store and get a prepaid SIM card, not have to show ID or anything for that. However, if you do want to have a contract, having a NIF and bank account here can make a difference so that you can sign up and get that direct withdrawal from your account. If you would like to take advantage of some of the better offers that are out there, Portugal is a country that I'm going to say is cheaper in general, lower costs in general than what you might pay in the US. However, it is not the lowest. Even having lived in Italy before living here in Portugal, I can say that the amount that I was paying there was a tiny fraction of what I am paying here. But the package that I have altogether definitely is worthwhile. And rather than kind of breaking some of these things out into different various services, having a package deal on a monthly contract is definitely worth it here. But I'll say even like as soon as you get here, even if you do just get that prepaid SIM card, totally worth it. If you get here, like I mentioned this in previous episodes about my first evening here in Portugal, that I wanted to order some food to be delivered, but because I didn't have a local Portuguese number, I couldn't order from most places. I think in the end, maybe I was able to make an order with my Italian number via Uber because I think they have some sort of VoIP system built into their app. But I was here, I had my Italian SIM card, and everything was working how it should. The problem was that I almost actually was not even able to make sure that I would have something to eat. In the end, I did go to the supermarket after traveling a whole day, which was not fun. Well, it wasn't that I was disappointed in having to go to a supermarket because like when you go to a new country, it's fun to get used to those things and get acquainted with them. But even regardless, I ended up somehow at the supermarket at that evening. And so after traveling for a full day, and if you're coming from the other side of the world, going to the supermarket may not be the first thing that you want to do upon arrival. This last point is something that I know, especially now, people try to avoid using social media, especially platforms like Facebook. I've spoken to many of you who've actually said that you have no interest in using Facebook, that you don't like Facebook, that you don't want to use Facebook. However, I would say that when you are moving to a new country, Facebook groups can be an invaluable resource to have to be able to connect with other people. In this episode, I will omit my usual sermon about avoiding the expat bubble, but I will say it is very important to have a balance in life, and sticking too much to one group or to another group can definitely cause an imbalance. But being able to learn about how things get done locally where you are, or about tips on where to go, where to eat, what office to go to for getting signed up for electricity, gas, whatever it may be. Having those connections locally can make a huge difference. And then sometimes even if you're looking for local real estate, sometimes people will be able to say who is somebody that they've worked with who speaks English. Of course, I would always say don't pay anything up front if you're looking for a rental. If you're looking for a home to purchase, it's a little bit of a different story if you're working with an agent, but really try to avoid anybody who's going to charge you the expat tax. Maybe at some point in the future, I should do an episode on the expat tax, but I don't know if that's something you're interested in. Let me know down in the comment section below here on YouTube. But of course, if you have any tips that you feel as though make a difference for a person who is moving to Portugal, feel free to leave that down in the comment section below. I know there's plenty that I didn't cover. These are only just some of the points that I think can make a difference on a day-to-day basis. Even something as simple as, like I said, joining a rewards program, it's not going to make the biggest difference. It's not going to be the make or break. However, sometimes the small little things that help you along the way can end up making a big impact on the overall experience. But of course, I'm Rafael de Furia. Stay safe and healthy out there. This has been another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Thank you so much for subscribing, liking these videos, and sharing them with your friends, as well as a huge thanks to this week's sponsor, Border.io. Of course, if you're needing help to get your Portuguese bank account and NIF, be sure to check out bordr.io/NYAG. That is it for this Friday night, and I will see you all next time. Later.